happy to be having lunch with all of you. I know that everybody is improvising right now and you're being bombarded with information. As Raphael said, what we thought would be smart is to use this time to try and share some of the questions that we've been getting from you all. And then just know that this is an experiment, that we're doing our best to get smart people on and available to you all really quickly. And if we learn some things today about ways we can do it differently next time, that's what we're going to do. So really excited that you all have the chance to meet Clark and Scott. We called them, asked them to be available to join us for lunch today with all of you. And Aaron, I think you know that we can keep taking questions and we'll do the best to kind of aggregate those and get those to them so that we get, number one, what's most important to you. And then just know that this afternoon, if there's some links that we can forward that respond to some of these questions, we'll make those available to you as well. So with that, Clark, I think we're turning it over to you. We know that managing people remotely right now within this crazy environment is one of the top things that we were getting from people. So I'm turning it over to you.
Very good. Thanks, Regina. It's good to be with all of you. I think there's something really special about the nonprofit space. My background, I started in HR in 1995 and was in the hospitality industry and the entertainment industry. But then I did spend some time in the nonprofit space as HR director for Penny Lane and then also community partners. And just knowing and going through a crisis, I believe there's something really special about going through it with other nonprofit leaders. All of you that are on the Zoom are truly caring individuals. So before we get into all the HR stuff, I just really encourage you to pick up the phone, even if you haven't spoken to someone in 10 years and you only sent a little LinkedIn comment or a text message. Take this opportunity to call someone and connect. And I really believe that, as all of you band together, it will help you and your organizations weather this crisis much better. So Regina and everyone at CNM, I really appreciate you inviting me to join all of you. And my head has been spinning just as an HR professional in helping all our clients navigate this. I'm the owner of a company called Expert Effect. And what I think is unique about us is we have a team of human resource experts, so we can bring in that expertise on today's Zoom. But we also have a team of stress resiliency experts. And that's one of my areas of specialty too. So by a show of hands, how many people would like some more stress resiliency during this time? All right, a lot of hands going up. So we don't have to just focus on HR, we can bring in the stress resiliency piece. And as we go along, please do share your questions via the comments, via Zoom. And then Aaron, I know you'll ping us and speak up if there's something that I should sound in on and answer.
Absolutely. And to kick things off, I think we've got a little poll queued up with some of the topics that you had provided. So I'm going to launch that now. Everybody should shortly be able to see this little pop-up poll. Want to get a sense of, what Clark should be speaking to, whether it's staff health and wellness, payroll services, or savings through furloughs, reassigning employee roles. If everybody could just add their little votes to the pop-up now. I'll give that a minute or so, and then we can post the results. And Clark, that should give you a little sense of the feel of the room. Are people able to be voting? Are you seeing pop-ups?
I'm not.
Interesting.
Nope, not seeing it.
That's what's on the slide.
No, that's the chat. We're seeing chat.
All right, well, let's skip the poll for now. It doesn't seem to be working. Sorry about that. But
Aaron, we're getting a lot about paid leave. We're seeing a lot about, sort of emergency response on the sort of stipend,
Yep.
How much flexibility organizations have, Clark. So maybe we can kick it off there.
Yep.
Sounds great. So yeah, one of the biggest things that of course is happening is employees not being able to work remotely. or an organization looking at their budget and having concerns that we might need to place people on furlough or we might need to lay them off. So we can go through some considerations there. We'll start with furloughs. So a furlough is when you temporarily lay someone off or you temporarily reduce their hours. Now, in the state of California currently, and I say currently because things are changing so quickly, I'm actually very impressed with how California and the federal government are responding quickly to pushing legislation through and emergency legislation. So when I say these things, we could get off the call in 3 hours from now, it could change. But currently in the state of California, the Labor Commission is fairly clear through various memorandums that they have released previously that a furlough, laying someone off temporarily, can only be up to 2 weeks or 1 pay period. So this is a huge implication to consider. If you believe that you are just going to need to lay people off for a week, 2 weeks of pay period, what you can do is just put them in an inactive status where they're not receiving pay, but you don't need to terminate their employment. Right now, the way California operates is if it goes over 2 weeks or a pay period, you need to terminate their employment. That has big implications for all of you. If you terminate someone's employment, lots of things are triggered. Number one, vacation payout. I remember when I used to be in the entertainment industry, we had several hockey teams under our umbrella, and we terminated a coach for one of the hockey teams, and his vacation balance was enormous. It was maxed out, and it got into this huge thing where everyone was like, hey, when the hockey season was off, you're at your cabin up in Minnesota during the summer doing nothing. But we had never documented the vacation, and he had this huge balance. So you might want to just run a vacation report for your organization to see what your exposure is for as you're laying, if you do lay people off and you need to do it more than 2 weeks or a pay period, how much would you need to pay out in vacation? Because that could be a big hit to your organization at this time. The other thing that gets triggered if you do terminate someone is loss of health insurance and dental and vision, typically at the end of the month when you terminate their employment. And then you have the employee needing to go on COBRA, and that being a significant expense for them if you're picking up a big part of that premium. So ideally, if you are going to do layoffs and furloughs, do it under 2 weeks or a pay period. And then we are going to be watching this very closely at Expert Effect, and on our website on the homepage, we will be posting updates. So hopefully there is potential that the California Labor Commission will change their stance on this and allow everyone during this pandemic to do longer furloughs so you can keep them in that active status and potentially keep their health benefits, dental and such going and not have to pay out their vacation.
One good question that just came in, Clark, is how these restrictions apply to part-time versus full-time employees. Is this specifically full-time or does it differ at all for part-time?
Great question. It's my understanding that it does not differ at all. So it would be the same restriction. And then if you do place someone on a furlough, you'll want to check your employee handbook and determine what is your vacation policy. Typically, employees should be able to utilize vacation time during the furlough, or just to kind of help with their wages. Historically, and this brings in the unemployment. There is unemployment in California, of course, that is here, and it's going to be tapped immensely during this time. So your employees can claim unemployment during this time. So it's very important that you give them a change in relationship form. This is a required form by the California government, showing that you are reducing their schedule or that you are temporarily laying them off. California requires that you give this to them. This is something they could give to the EDD as proof of exactly what's occurred. You'll also want to give them an EDD brochure. You can find that on the EDD website. You could email it to the employee as a PDF. And that's a requirement in California. You must give that form to them if they have a loss in hours or they're temporarily laid off. And now historically, the EDD has had a 7-day waiting period, which means that if you laid off an employee, first week they're laid off, they get no unemployment benefits. Thankfully, as of 2 days ago, the EDD and the governor mandated this, that the waiting time is waived. So employees can start collecting unemployment on day 1. So that's fantastic news. Kudos to the governor for that. By the way, I have a little love-hate relationship with the governor. Earlier this week, I was interviewed by NBC News to go on air, and they were scheduled me for Monday at 5 p.m. and then again for Tuesday, and the governor came in with press conferences and Facebook Live things, so I got bumped. So I kind of was looking forward to being on the news and spreading stuff about stress resiliency. But I've forgiven the governor because he did do this thing for the EDD. So with that said, employees, if they come to you and say, hey, I just want to use my vacation time, I don't want to tap unemployment benefits, that's not advantageous for them because they are missing out on the EDD unemployment benefits. And then they could save that vacation for a later date. So they would definitely be eligible for unemployment if they are laid off. So it's good for them. So I mean, it's up to them if they want to use vacation time, if they don't, but they could do that. You want to check your handbook policy. Can employees use vacation in smaller increments? Unemployment typically pays up to about 60%. So is it possible that maybe they could supplement that and each day take 2 hours vacation? Most handbooks don't provide that provision. Typically, that can't be done, but you want to check. And then you want to explore those implications, like do you have to, do you not have to, and whatnot. Sick pay, if an employee has a minor cold, they have the flu, heaven forbid they or one of their family members have coronavirus, they can utilize sick time. However, you cannot force them to utilize sick time. That was made very clear recently by the government. So if they say, yeah, we're homesick, et cetera, I can't come to work, you cannot force them to, but they are able to utilize sick time. I'll pause for a moment. Aaron, do we have any key questions on this topic that I should address?
Nothing else has been bubbling up. There was a question about language around furlough, but I think we can get to that in the PR kind of messaging side of things when we switch gears. Curious from some of the other topics that we had talked about before, it may be a little moot now, but kind of on-site and remote work considerations and reassigning employee roles and some of the legal restrictions around those.
Yes, can definitely go into that. Let me just, while we're on this topic of furloughs, I'll just share just a couple quick things before we move on. One is, if you believe you need to lay off your employees, there has been a longstanding program in the state of California called the Work Sharing Program. Not a lot of employers know about it, but instead of laying off your employees, if you're able to just reduce the hours of employees by a certain percentage and everyone kind of takes a hit and you can rotate that, it's advantageous for the unemployment benefits that the employee will receive, and it's advantageous for the employer as well. It's a little complicated, but you can check out the EDD website for that. And then lastly, folks, if you have to, and I hope you don't have to, but if you have to reduce hours, if you have to lay off people and the economy doesn't improve, I believe it will. I believe we're gonna have a quick turnaround on this. But if it doesn't, employees can get desperate, right? Money is a big driver, and desperation can cause people to do things. When employees get desperate, they could look to sue an employer. Even if it's been a long-term employee, trust them. If things get desperate enough, they could sue. So as you're making decisions on layoffs, on furloughs, you want to make sure you're not opening yourselves up to a discrimination claim. So you want to think through, is this impacting a certain ethnicity, certain gender more than other genders? By the way, we're choosing to lay people off if you're not laying everyone off. If you're laying off just one employee and they're in a protected group, could they claim that you laid them off because they're in that protected group? So really think that through. Get an HR professional involved, get an employment attorney involved if you don't feel you have an airtight business justification for making the decision you're doing. And then it's good to put it in writing, maybe a memo to your board, whatnot, saying these are the furloughs, these are the layoffs we're doing, and these are the reasons, these are why we chose the positions we did. And it shows there's a true business justification, no discriminatory reasons.
Two more questions around paid sick time. One, can you explain the provisions for paid sick time from employees who did not have paid sick time before the crisis? And also, if you reduce work for some positions, can the employee make up those hours by taking paid sick time or vacation later?
Very good. So for those of you in California, sick time is required for employees, 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. So if your employees have not been accruing sick time and they meet the eligibility requirements as required by the California sick leave law, my advice is to go back and retroactively figure out how much their sick time balance could be. Because again, if people are in a desperate situation and they should have had a sick pay balance and they didn't, that's where they could go to the Labor Commission. So it go back and see, okay, based on this, based upon your handbook policy, or if you don't have a handbook policy, employees earning 1 hour for every 30 hours worked. And I'm sorry, Aaron, what was the second part of that question?
If you reduce work for some positions, can the employee make up the hours by taking paid sick time or vacation?
Yes. Yep. So typically, want to check your handbooks. Typically, sick time is going to be reserved just for preventative care and whatnot, and also taking care of a sick family member or taking care of themselves if they are sick and they cannot work. If you start just saying, hey, I feel bad for my employees, which I know in the nonprofit world, we're like, yes, I'll do anything for you. I care about you. But if you do start saying, hey, yeah, use your sick time, even though you're not sick, you're setting a precedent that your organization will have to follow. And you're paying out money that you don't need to pay out. And you might need that for your bottom line. So be careful on the sick time piece. But employees can supplement it, but always probably best to look at unemployment benefits first. A lot of employers are asking us, hey, unemployment, is this going to hurt me if like all these employees file for unemployment? Yeah, it will affect your claim. It's kind of like having a car accident. Your insurance rates are going to go up. So your unemployment rate could go up. Probably not going to see a hit for another quarter or so. And then long term, it will go back down if you don't have that unemployment exposure.
One more good question just came in. Can you clarify what the sick time requirements are for cities versus counties versus the state? State has up to 24 hours, county has up to 72. Some cities have lower. Which are you supposed to follow?
All right, how much time do we have? This could be a long answer because states and cities, they all, there's just a lot of variety out there. At the end, we'll show a PowerPoint slide that has my contact info. If you need some guidance on this, just send me an email and let us know what city you're in. And then an HR expert from our team could look into that for you and respond.
Very cool. Before we switch gears into PR, curious if you could just speak a little bit to some of the health and wellness and stress reduction that you were mentioning before, separate from a lot of these legal requirements.
Yes, most definitely. Now is the time to help your employees take care of themselves. I have been finding over the last week, you know, as a business owner, this is a kind of an emotional period, a period that can have some anxiety. What I do when I'm anxious is I pour myself into work, but that doesn't help my stress resiliency and my health. So you, as the leaders of your organization, doing things to encourage your employees to be healthy, giving them grace on deadlines so that they don't go in intense mode of work and not getting time out for the sleep they need, the exercise they need, etc. Now is a great time to do a health challenge. Like, hey, everyone's at home working remotely. Get your Fitbits. The employee who gets the most steps in via social isolation, not in group walks, but whoever gets the most steps in, hey, this is a little reward to you. So do some things that really encourage your employees to really help themselves. Walking meetings, you know, say, hey, we need to have a meeting. everyone get on your cell phones and walk. I think in LA, we're still allowed to walk outside as long as we're in social isolation. I don't think we're in total shutdown mode. So use this opportunity, get out and about and walk, and encourage your employees to do it. If you're on the phone with them, say, hey, let's walk around the block while we talk. Very important. Also, I think just encouraging employees during this time, because they might have some extra time. You know, they don't have their commute. You might not be getting an inflow of services. And so they're still working, but they got a lot of idle time. So really encourage your employees to pursue some passions during this time. Instead of going on social media and the news and that just feeding people's anxiety, do something that like, hey, everyone, let's share as an icebreaker for a meeting. What's a passion, something that you love doing that you've never had time to do that you're going to pursue now?
Great advice. And maybe one more question before we switch gears. This is a good one, just came through. What's an employer's obligation to provide technology while working from home? Whether it's, you know, laptops or supplementing internet coverage or paying for phones, that kind of thing.
Excellent question. So if an employee supplies their own technology while working from home, there are no laws to say that we need to reimburse employees for utilizing their own technology or their own equipment for doing a job. Based on case law, what is probably reasonable is to reimburse an employee $25 per month for them using their own cell phone and $50 per month for them using their own laptop. And that just shows that you are taking care of them and like wear and tear on their computer. If it breaks, all of that helps pay for that. So if you can't provide everyone with a laptop, doing those reimbursements will insulate you from employees saying that they weren't reimbursed for using their own equipment.
Got it. Well, we're just about at the halfway point. I think I'm going to try and share your slide so that everyone can have access to your information. We'll also share it around with the video and all of, you know, contact information afterwards, but should be able to see Clark's contact information here through Expert Effect at experteffect.com. And with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to Regina again to introduce our next expert.
All right.
Clark.
First of all, thank you, Clark. And for everyone that's listening, we know that the situation is fluid, that the government is trying to figure out how to best address all of the demands that are extraordinary. And we will do our best to try and communicate links to you without bombarding you. So it's my pleasure to introduce Scott Pansky, a communications expert, PR god, and one of our most popular speakers at last year's conference. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott. We know that one of the issues is how to communicate with all your stakeholders in a reasonable way and hopefully in an inspiring way. And we know that leaders are stressed themselves. So Scott, really glad you're going to be here to join us.
Thanks, Regina, and thanks, Aaron. I appreciate the opportunity. This is, as everybody's saying, a really difficult time. But I also find it's a great time for nonprofits to thrive. And that as we go through this challenging time, everybody really is looking at you as the leader. Every single person who's on this phone call, on this whether that's communication or whether or not it is just information in general. I want to reiterate something that Raphael and Clark said, because I think it's really important. Clark talked about how you could help your employees in regards to exercise and fitness. I can tell you for the first 2 days that we were going through this crisis working at home, I left my chair 3 times and my first lunch was Pop-Tarts. And that wasn't the right way to do things. And I just want to remind all of you, if you're going to be a good leader, if you're going to be able to help the people that you're supporting, you have to take care of yourself. It's kind of like sitting on the airplane, you know, and that you've got to put on your mask first before you put on the mask for others. So take that time because it's going to help you. When recently I sat down with a few nonprofits and I found out they had very small operating budgets, Their budgets were either under 500,000 or under 100,000, and many of them were special event driven organizations. Those are organizations that potentially were going to go under. And it was like, there has to be something we can all do to protect our nonprofits, no matter whether you're a large nonprofit or you're a small nonprofit. And so we have to think of our communication platforms and understand where we can communicate and who are our target audiences, and understanding that probably the most important thing you can do right now, more than anything else, is live and breathe your mission, the mission of your organization. I remember sitting on a panel once in which somebody had asked us that, you know, all these corporations are asking so much of us, what kind of return on investment are they looking for? And people were talking about increasing sales and publicity and exposure, things of that nature. But I'm going to be honest with you, if I work for a phone company, right? And that my job is to do what? It's to sell phones. That's my job. My job's not to save the world or help any of the charities that are on this call today. So what I need from you before I can even get an ROI when I partner with you is to really understand that you're living and breathing the mission. So if I want to help your target audience, I want to do that because that's the people I'm trying to help, and you are the right organization to reach them. So as I talk today, my kind of small agenda that I wanted to share with you is understand your target audiences and what you're trying to accomplish with your target audiences, some of the tools and resources that you can use, and a little bit of sponsorship support, because all of us are having to deal with this at this stage. And so I want to make sure we're thinking about all these folks. The first thing is on your target audiences, that your first and most important audience are your staff. And as Clark had said, is how do you take care of your staff? And make sure you're communicating with your staff. If you have Outlook and you have Outlook teams, talk to your staff. Have video calls, just like what we're doing right now. They need that leadership. They need to understand the organization's not going to fall apart. They don't want to have to worry about their jobs. They want to know if they can still make a difference. So the more we can communicate, the better. When you go quiet, they start wondering, and their minds go all over the place. So we really have to customize an employee engagement program for our staff. Then we're looking at our donors and our volunteers. This is, to me, your bread and butter. This is the one thing each of your organizations own. Doesn't matter what charity you are. These are people who are very loyal to you. These are the ones who you count on a regular basis. This is not Giving Tuesday in November where everybody's bombarded by nonprofit messaging. These are people that have made ongoing donations or have come to your events. So think of them, if everybody understands what an influencer is, it's somebody who has an audience of their own. When you communicate to your donors, to your board members, to your volunteers, they are communicating to other people. They love your organization. On our website, and I'll make sure Regina has a copy of this that she can send to people. We put together a report once on influencers and the importance of influencers. When we do direct mail, we reach roughly, maybe a 1 to 3% return on investment. Some might be higher depending on the organization. But when people are following an authentic influencer, somebody who cares about your organization, our research has shown that 33% of the people will make a donation or volunteer. Now, obviously, volunteerism is going to be very difficult in today's environment, but there are other things that we can talk about that people can do in their homes, and that's so many different things. You have to communicate to your board. Your board is extremely important. Your board are the people who care about your organization the most, right? They're invested. You might have a pay for play kind of thing in which they have to make $1,000 or a $5,000 donation to your organization. Now's the time to get the second donation or a third donation, to get them to open up the Rolodexes that they have to help you in building relationships and communicating what's going on with your charity. The key to this, obviously, is sensitivity. How is your organization sensitive to what's going on today? Are your services somehow connecting to what is going on there? How are your people, the people you're supporting, impacted by what's happening today? There is not one organization that is not impacted. I sit on a local YMCA board, and it is very difficult to shut our doors. Very, very difficult. But at the end of the day, we're still going to service people, whether it's online exercises, activities for children, different things that can be done. The YMCA will do that. So I think that's important. Then it's looking at your sponsors and your partners. These are organizations, some may have been with you a year, some might have been with you 15 years, 20 years. What we want to be able to do is to make sure that your partners are communicated with. It's very, very important. But here's the secret. And I want to make sure everybody understands this. First thing you do is you don't ask for money. Your cause is in need. You don't ask for money. You know what you do? You ask them what they need. This is your time to help them. Clark was talking about the employee engagement and what's going on with employees. I've got a bunch of employees who are sitting home right now, whether they have free time or not. And I want you to think of any company that you work with, and they have their employees sitting at home right now. What are they doing? Some are working, some aren't. Give them something to do. Give them an art project. I was talking to one of our offices on the East Coast, and they had this really cute exercise in which they had their neighborhood draw pictures of rainbows. And then they got in their cars and they drove around the neighborhood in their own cars, looking at rainbows. We've got Easter coming up. We could have people doing Easter eggs. There's fun things that can be done. Whether we're writing thank you notes, whether we're writing notes to kids and families that are in need, these employees can go out and do something. So you are potentially giving your partner something that is of value to them during that time frame. The other thing is your partner, let's say, for instance, it might be a restaurant company, and that you've been dealing with this restaurant for a long time. How many of you have done drives where 15, 20% of the dinner goes to your organization? That's a common restaurant promotion. Panda Express just donated $2 million to Feeding America. But here's the thing about what's interesting about these restaurants. Many of them, as you know, are now just delivery. There's no sitting down anywhere. So how are they going to stay alive? Just like your organization, they're looking for things that they can be doing. So can you recognize your sponsors in your communications and let them know, hey, keep in mind that Denny's is one of our partners. We encourage you to go get a meal at Denny's. It's possible Denny's would make a donation to your organization. So it's just kind of thinking about how you can utilize your resources to benefit them. But don't come out with a fundraising problem right now. Come back with a marketing solution. And that solution could, again, be internal comms, or it could be external comms for that organization. When you talk with everybody—
Scott, for a second.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Sorry, some questions popping up.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to clarify. I think you're talking mostly about partner relations here and sort of not going to larger partners with fundraising asks right now. There are some questions popping up about, smaller donor relations. Should you be postponing direct mail donor appeals right now? With people who are, how do you ask donors, for money right now when a lot of people are personally struggling with their own financial security? So I understand sort of the partner distinction,
Sure.
But maybe talk a little bit more on the donor side.
It's almost the same thing. And what I mean by that is that these donors care about your organization. If they're reaching out to you or you're reaching out to them, you have to think, what is the goal of your outreach? Is it education or is it fundraising? If you're trying to do fundraising, if you do not acknowledge what is happening in this environment today, you're making a mistake. If you're going out with a traditional donor letter, it's not going to work. It's going to actually be seen as offensive. So what you'll want to be able to do is come back out and acknowledge upfront what is happening in the community today. This is how it's impacting our organization. And, we're not closing our doors. We still need to operate and do what we need to do to be successful. So, just be very sensitive and acknowledge what's going on.
Do you have any more tips and tricks on that approach about sort of how to craft a donor message that acknowledges, the urgency of the situation and still, sort of your own organization's needs?
It's funny. I just did messaging for a global nonprofit as well as a local nonprofit, just using these resources. So the first thing is you have to craft your message. What is the key message about your organization and the connection to what is going on in the world? Be consistent. Have that information up on your website, because a lot of people are going to come up and they're going to go to your website. If you're insensitive on your own website, in your social media, and how you're communicating with folks, that it's not going to come across as authentic. One of the things, it's an old saying I've had for years, but it's one always worth bringing up, is your communication should be an art. And the art stands for authentic, responsible, and transparent. And so when you reach out and you develop your outreach efforts, it's going to be as simple as a letter that acknowledges what they may be going through, right? It's not about us right now. It's about what our donors are going through. These are families, these are seniors, these are people worried about what's going to happen tomorrow. And what we have to do is remind them what we do. We are storytellers. And if we can tell a good story that is related to something that's important to them, they will respond. And we've seen that through 9/11 and other timeframes. So I think it's just important, again, to be authentic. Good stories work.
Would you repeat your ART acronym again? Somebody asked if you could spell that out.
ART is authentic, responsible. And so authentic, obviously everybody understands, is it's sincere and it's caring. Responsible is its sensitivity, and it's something to make sure that the people on the other side understand that you're going to do this the right way and that you're very caring. And transparent. How are those funds going to be used? Doing a huge fundraiser to go to a general fund might not be the best use of your resources right now. There's a specific program that you have that helps feed a community or helps provide clothing or soaps and essentials, things that need. I've been talking to a few TV stations in town right now. They're not going to take those individual donations like what we see for Toys for Tots during the holidays. You know, we don't know who's touched what, so there's so much more sensitivity. So fundraising and cash is going to be a big way of doing that.
Yeah, there are a few different messaging sort of ideas and angles coming through in the chat that I would love your feedback on.
Sure.
One here from Jonathan is that, you know, nonprofits who are on the front line now will be on the front lines for rebuilding after the pandemic subsides, so that an investment in the nonprofit now is an investment in the future. Another one here was from Larry Kaplan, mentioning a Chicago mayor's quote of during a cold snap, we all get cold, but the poor get colder, and talking about your nonprofit's clients, often disadvantaged at-risk communities, may be more vulnerable now, and that their support, you know, your support is needed for them even more. So I don't know, curious on some other approaches to messaging angles in this time.
You know, a really good website, a charity website that I liked, was No Kid Hungry. And if you check out that site, you'll see all the messaging about the kids who are being impacted about not getting their lunches and the call to action to help kids have access to meals. So if you look at how they approach that with their target audience, I'm talking to Meals on Wheels about a program right now, and they are reaching very high risk audiences and going directly to their homes to deliver those programs. So when you look at how you can tie your mission into these vulnerable audiences, it'll go a long way.
What about timing? That's another one that just came in. With everything sort of changing so quickly, how do you approach timing, either for, you know, current needs right now, you know, planning for future events? We had talked a little bit yesterday about sort of frequency and timing of messaging.
So two things there. One, I want to promote somebody else's webinar that I just saw this morning. It came out yesterday. It was by CCS Fundraising. And if you go to their blog, CCS Fundraising, their blog, they have a webinar with slides. And I found it was really fascinating that they were saying, don't stop your communication at all. Keep going full steam, because if you don't, you're going to lose. That bump in time is going to hurt you. I don't disagree with what they said. I think the one thing, again, it's about being sensitive. I think if you create almost like a calendar of events, like every Friday, we're going to have a video message that we're going to post from our CEO or the president of our board giving an update of what's going on. If we do a webinar like what we're doing right now, and that we can have this taped and then other people can see this and benefit from this. All of your organizations can do this. If you're looking at fundraising like a direct mail piece, do you send out a direct mail piece every week right now? No, you probably don't. It costs too much money. So if you're doing it quarterly, doing it quarterly. The hardest thing are these special events and trying to do an event, big, huge event this week or in the next 2 months. So many things are being canceled. So do you cancel them all together, or do you get creative and look at different ways to host events? So whether you do a webinar and guest speakers, whether it's a paid forum online to raise money for your cause, there's so many different tools you can do, but you have to keep communicating. Just again, if you're not sensitive, if it's your traditional communication tools, it's not going to help.
A little bit of back and forth in the chat too. I'm curious on your thoughts about the advisability of attracting new donors in this time versus appealing to your existing donors.
Great question. My gut instinct, and I wrote a post on this that's on my LinkedIn, and everybody's welcome to join in there. And if you need counsel, I'm glad to reach back out to you. But this is how I look at that. The current donors are the ones who care about you the most. Reach out to them. These donors are your volunteers, regular donors, board members. They're the ones who already care. To go out to a brand new audience, unless it's somehow tied to what they are going through today, got to be hypersensitive to that. There's still cancer that is going on out there today, right? There still needs to be research for this type of effort. We can't stop that. We have to find a cure for cancer. Right? So does that mean we stop and we don't try and get new donors? No, but we have to tell stories. Think about people who have cancer are very vulnerable right now. If they're in a hospital situation at a St. Jude's, Memorial Sloan Kettering, where they don't even have access to masks, like how do we help educate people about what our needs are so it becomes relevant to what is happening in our communities?
Great, thank you. Curious, any more urgent questions coming through, or Regina, maybe you want to wrap things up with some thoughts?
Sure. A couple of things. We know that we're all conflicted about the urgent messages that we want to send out to our audiences. And we also know that, to Scott's point, we need to be sensitive. One of the things that I'm curious about is how all of you are dealing with this stuff. We know some of you are thinking about, to Scott's point, virtual events that are kind of in the planning phase right now. And, we would be happy to keep communicating about what some of the cool ideas are that people are coming up with. We also know that our own people, our employees, our funders, our stakeholders, our investors are all worried about what's happening in the stock market, what's happening with this virus and the science behind it. And I just want to share one last thought, which is we happen to be working with Dr. Lucy Jones in preparation for what was supposed to be the 501 conference in May. And one of the things that she said that they learned in Santa Barbara and Ventura with the fires and with the floods is the extraordinary role that nonprofits play in giving all of us a sense of place. So as you can communicate, as Clark said and as Scott said, with your employees and with your stakeholders about, you're still here, you're gonna be here, that you're still available. It might be remote, and we all adjust, but we'll be back. I think just reminding your team that you play an extraordinary role in helping your community feel like they're part of something, and for those that have money, they can invest in something that matters. I think we're going to be making it up for a little while, but not to underestimate the power that you have to help people get through this time as things are changing so quickly. So I just wanted to say thank you all.
Regina, could I add
Go for
one
it, Scott.
thing, one last thing before we go? Is I just wanted to give you all just a couple of tools, if you haven't thought about these tools for communication, to consider them. So we talked about being storytellers. Number one is video content. Create videos, short snippets, other pieces that you can send out. You can do video series like a web series or vlogs. The webinars we've talked already, you can live stream programs. Use influencers. Talk to influencers, people who care about your cause. There's a note here about people with the arts and entertainment that you guys do great things. You know, Josh Gad has a link now where he's reading stories to people and, you know, acting out the characters. So if you have celebrity talent, you know, go ahead and utilize that to help as influencers. Write byline articles for local publications, blog posts, and post those blog posts on your LinkedIn, not just on Facebook, but invite people into Facebook for Facebook Live events and Facebook groups so that you keep engaging with your community. So think of all of those resources. And then finally, don't forget, this was brought up earlier too, pick up your phone and reach out to people. People want to hear people. And I, like Raphael, I've been on more of these video type calls in the last week than I have in a long time. I tell you, I love seeing people's faces. I love interacting with people. So take advantage of the technology to use this to talk to your donors and other audiences you're trying to reach.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. I know you're busy. I know you have a lot to do. We're going to be sending out some information this afternoon. We want to get some advice on what would be helpful. What are the burning issues? We know next week, one of the things that we want to get everybody to think about is the voice of our sector. You know, we need to be heard as policymakers are making decisions. And as foundations are trying to decide how to address the current and changing needs. And our voice needs to be heard right now. You guys are the content experts. And we have 1 million people in LA County that work in the nonprofit sector. We need them to speak up. So thank you all. Thank you, Scott, as always. Thank you, Clark, for being available today. And we'll be here next week and we'll be asking more questions and trying to get to those answers. So take care.
Thank you, everybody. We'll be ending the conversation now. We'll be following up with you all on email with some of the content that was discussed and do our best to get a video of all of this out, as a few of you have been asking in the chat. So again, thank you all for joining us, and we hope to do this again pretty soon. Have a good weekend, everybody.